We've got another great guest coming to you from the Ad Podcast today. Josh Metz is the Chief Marketing Officer of Sesh Products, a fast-growing nicotine pouch brand focused on modern smoke-free alternatives. He's got extensive background leading marketing strategies for innovative consumer brands spanning CMO roles at Sesh, SLUSHY, and ZitSticka. Josh blends creative thinking with a strategic growth to elevate brand presence and engagement in competitive markets. At Sesh, he's helping shape the brand's momentum and visibility through high-impact partnerships and audience-focused campaigns, connecting products with today's lifestyle-driven consumers. Josh, appreciate you coming on, man. Appreciate the shipment. I don't know if you can tell. I see you've got yours all up on the top deck right there. I don't know if you can see.
Absolutely.
Here's my guy right here.
Yeah, great to be here, Dylan.
So I got my. Yeah, my pleasure. So, I always like to kick the show off with a little bit of origin story. I detect, either probably an Aussie accent there, I think, or maybe Kiwi. I can't always pin them straight up, but tell me a little bit about where you grew up, what'd you study and how'd you get into marketing and advertising?
Yeah, absolutely. I was born in South Africa, but shortly made my way over to Australia at the ripe age of 1 and was there
nice.
most of my youth. I did a master's in architecture in Sydney, and 3 months after graduating that, I pretty much made my way over to America as part of the founding team at Tinder.
Let's go. Okay.
Yeah, long time ago, joined Tinder before it was really even called Tinder, and then joined the early team there. It was like maybe 5 or 6 of us working out of the corner of a Match.com office in West Hollywood, LA. And I guess the role I first took on was marketing. And that's kind of how I made the very natural shift from architecture to dating app marketing. And yeah, from there went into skincare and then media and now nicotine. So again, all natural progressions, but
right. One building block after another.
Exactly right.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about the Tinder days. You mentioned that you guys were working out of the Match office, and I haven't studied, the origin story super closely. I was part of the influencer agency that took Hinge to the market and before the Match.com acquisition. So I know the space. Yeah, I know the space super well. But so was Tinder like very early brought into the Match umbrella, or did it start as like an external thing and then get acquired? Like, tell me about kind of what happened like in the early days.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the right way to look at it. Like Tinder, well, it was born out of the lab IAC, which was Match.com's company. So from day one, Tinder was already kind of owned by IAC, and it started by Sean Rad and Justin Mateen. Sean was working for an IAC-owned company as well, part of their portfolio. So it kind of spun out from there. And yeah, it was amazing. We were all very young. We're taking a lot of big risks and bets on, what modern dating felt like at that time, and what it was lacking. And, there was obviously a few things like advancements in technology. The location services on the iPhone became available. You were able to locate people around you, and that's kind of what developed the natural sort of discovery of people within your radius selection. So that's kind of the technology that inspired the thinking behind Tinder. But there was just a need for young people to meet each other in a modern way. That wasn't, old school dating websites like Match.com or eHarmony or, whatever it was. So that's kind of how the thinking came about and where we got to. And then it caught on like wildfire. The rest is really history. It just, really changed the way I think young people ended up meeting ever since it was brought to market, and still impacts the way people probably meet today.
Yeah, I think it's 2 out of 3 relationships start on online dating now, something crazy like that. So obviously another innovation was the swipe, feature of dating, right? Like you guys were the first ones to bring that to the market. But if you think about that user behavior, kind of goes back to like Hot or Not, even, and definitely when Mark Zuckerberg hacked the the Facebook at Harvard, and basically, allowed people to do a hot or not, rating of people who were in his building, or in basically the, you know, the dorm websites at Harvard. That was basically the initial thinking of like where Facebook came from too. So this whole idea of like the addictive nature, or like the, kind of that just left or right quick impulse, like, do you think somebody's hot, go right? Do you think somebody's not hot, go left? That's kind of an innovation that's been around, but you guys brought that forefront to the dating market. How much was that?
Yeah.
How much was that innovation kind of borrowed from those previous examples, and how much did that kind of serve as, kind of the engagement piece that kept people in the app and kept people coming back every day?
I think there's probably two different things at play in your question. There's a decision-making process, whether we as humans find another human attractive or not. That's the hot or not decision-making process you're talking about. Was digitized in different ways. And I think there's the swipe itself, which as a mechanism and a motion on a screen in an app hadn't been used that much or at all in mobile apps at that point. A lot of it was scrolling vertically.
Mm-hmm.
And so the swipe, I know it seems very normal now in today's world, but back in 2012, swiping left and right wasn't really used on the iPhone in many ways, maybe in games, but not really in apps in that way, in the way Tinder and our Jonathan Badeen, who was our CPO, designed it. So the swipe itself was incredibly innovative in terms of a function and user behavior. But it's really the digital embodiment of what we as humans do every day when we see another human. Are they attractive? Are they not? It's an immediate decision, just turned into a swipe, a new function in a new format, which was dating apps.
Yeah, and if you think about the swipe or the tap and the full screen usage of vertical video, that really became the basis of TikTok and Snapchat and a lot of these others, emerging social platforms too. So it was kind of an innovation that spun on a whole new way to do social.
For sure. And I think it not only the swipe, but the sort of mechanism of how Tinder worked in decision-making process. Everything was pitched to us after that. The Tinder for apartment hunting, the Tinder for dog walking, the Tinder for choosing what car you want. It really started a movement that I don't even know if we fully comprehend how impactful that swipe creation was, but here we are.
Yeah, kind of became almost like a verb in a way, like how you use particular apps, and like you said, spawned all sorts of different copycats that tried to use it in their categories to emerging, success or failures, I suppose. But cool. So so when you were at Tinder, were you in LA or were you already in Austin by then?
No, I was in LA. I went from Sydney to LA for about 8 years, did 2 years in New York, back to LA after that, and now Austin, Texas. So jumping around.
Love it. And then, after Tinder, was SLUSHY next, or was the skincare play with the ZitStickers? What was next?
We went, after Tinder. I thought it would be really interesting to take on acne, and that's when we went into skincare. There was this whole notion of defeating stigma around young people meeting online with dating, right? And that's what we did at Tinder, introduce a product that young people could date from, and highly stigmatized. Young people didn't want to date back then online in that sense. The sort of notion was, you'd sort of failed in life or love if you were using an online product to find another partner. But the same thing was happening with skincare. There was no such thing as like skin positivity or owning your acne, or really even like pimple patches in the sort of today's sense of the word. But there was this idea that if you had acne, you were also like failing at something, right? Or you weren't your best version. And I think with this sort of empowerment movement and owning your own acne and skin positivity, I think we played a large part in that at ZitSticka, and we really showed that, even our selection of models we selected models with acne so that we could show what our products did. We didn't want to go for the perfect, glowy, model. We just wanted to use people who were real, who represented everyone, because everyone gets acne. And so we went into that, and that was interesting to me personally because, I like this idea of marketing stigmatized products. It makes you work harder, makes you think harder. Your sort of limitations around creative problem solving are greater, and so your solutions are there are less solutions, and so you have to work harder to find them and bring them to life. And that was certainly a challenge at Tinder, and changing sort of young people's behavior and outlook or perception of dating apps. And then the same thing with pimple patches, was getting people to own it, wear it on the street, on a night out, at work. There was a parallel there that I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it also kind of rode the wave of like, Dove, when they started using real models, or kind of the backlash to like the Victoria's Secret, model. And then some of these underwear brands that popped up that were using real people, and kind of, I think part of that was, you want to show people that are more reflective of who the consumers actually are, versus just this aspirational, idea of beauty that maybe is unattainable for most people. Then
Right.
I think the other thing that it did is it kind of, coincided with the emergence of, kind of the lower production value, or the more realistic production value of like user generated content as well. Right. So,
For sure.
kind of your own social or your paid social assets started to look like real humans versus actresses and models.
Exactly right. Nailed it.
Awesome.
Nailed it.
Very cool. All right. So you talked about, liking to take on brands that maybe are changing user behavior, or are stigmatized in one way or the other. It probably doesn't get it much more stigmatizing than nicotine, right? So, the advertising industry and tobacco have had a sordid relationship going way back in time, to where, basically tobacco got kicked out of basically all marketing channels for a long time, because of the health situation, and how long it took the big tobacco companies to come clean and actually admit that their products were maybe dangerous in some way. But then there's been this emergence of nicotine alternatives. The first instances was nicotine gum, and making it as a way to sustain nicotine to quit tobacco. But what was exciting about Sesh, and can you tell me a little bit about how you came on board? And I think what I also found interesting in the research is you guys have a lot of celebrity investors that I imagine were maybe former nicotine users that wanted to get off cigarettes and move to an alternative. So can you tell me a little bit about kind of how the company came to be, and how'd you get involved?
Yeah, definitely. The company actually started in Canada, with gum.
Oh, okay.
And and our CEO and founder, Max Cunningham, he had some foresight. He saw the way the US market was going. It was quite immature in terms of its nicotine pouch maturity. There weren't many brands here. The leading brand, Zyn, was like, maybe the fourth or fifth most popular pouch in Europe. Europe, obviously a far more mature market. These pouches started in Sweden. The market's far more advanced there. The pouches, you get everything from all different types of pouches there. Here, it's pretty standardized. And we're still far from catching up to Europe today, but Max kind of saw this ahead of time and thought, hang on, if I can get a license to sell these pouches in America, maybe, there might be a little gap for me. And his vision was spot on. There aren't many licenses. There's around 10 or so that exist in the US, maybe a few more. But it's a small playing field, and they're very difficult to obtain as well. So when Max submitted his license, this was 22, and it was approved. It was one of the last ones to be approved. And so it gave us the opportunity, when the time did come, to sell these pouches on shelves here at major retailers. And, we were up against Big Tobacco and a few other smaller emerging brands, but it gave us a really big opportunity to take a nice slice of the entire pie and really bring a different brand to the table. I got involved through one of our funding partners, 8BC, who helped us raise most of our capital and really led that round. And, I've got a great relationship with them, and they sort of saw what Sesh needed, which was someone that could bring the brand to life, get it out there, and I was trying to look for the right next move, and it just kind of coincided timing wise, and it just worked out.
Nice. And are you a consumer as well?
Yeah, I do. I use them. I went through a period where I vaped for about a year and a
Yeah.
half out of nowhere. I never even touched a cigarette before that. I don't know what it was. I just started vaping. This was like from cold turkey, never having had a cigarette, to like a vapor all of a sudden. And pouches were great. They were a great tool to help me reduce vaping. And then over time, I just stopped using vapes and was using, I would say, pouches on a daily basis, but nowhere near as much as I was vaping. And then now I actually use them more so for that, like if I really want to focus on some deep work, or really need to be locked in on a meeting or a call like this, I'll pop in a pouch beforehand, just to keep me level and locked in. And I like that aspect to it, more so than like satisfying a craving, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. It's funny because, some of the marketing or like the earned media around nicotine pouches has been around like the finance bro culture, or like
Yeah,
coders, people in Silicon Valley, people that work 90 hours a week. And it's kind of used as like a little bit of a, like a mind hack almost, in a way, like you were just
for
talking
sure.
about, like you need to dial in and get some stuff, and it gives you some extra energy and some extra focus. How much did you guys, lean into that? Was that an organic thing, or was that a thing that you think like was kind of like generated through the industry at large through PR? I wonder if you have some more, some more inside baseball behind that, because there was also a time where it became like associated with like the right wing, which was weird. And, just be kind of curious of like
Yeah,
how you saw things evolving behind the scenes with that PR push around like the finance bro culture and stuff like that.
I think you're touching on a few things there, and a lot of it's, like falls very closely to regulatory and compliance in general in this space. I think from our side, I can't really talk to other brands. I can only speak to ours, and we don't make health claims. We don't push nicotine as a productivity hack. We play really responsibly within the rules that have been set out here in the United States, and I think it's important to do so. A lot of what you're seeing, probably from like the frat bro, finance bro world, came from, I would say, those cultures that used nicotine in that bro sense, rather than like the way we marketed, which is just an upgraded nicotine format. That's a modern upgrade to a ritual that you have been using for years, but you need something more, or need something that is an alternative for you, that's better for you as well. So I think for us, again, like we want to play by the rules. The right wing's political side of nicotine is always going to be there. You go back to the Marlboro days, where they'll tell you Marlboro's what kept the boys alive in the camps and whatnot, while they were in the trenches and wherever else. But I think that's all. Who knows how much of that is brand driven as
Yeah.
well? Who knows what brand behind the scenes? Again, I can't talk to that, but there's always going to be that tobacco nicotine tie to the right wing of American politics. And then I think it comes down to right versus left, what's allowed, what's not, what's woke, what are we regulating, what are we not. It's all tied into that same conversation. But yeah, I think it's certainly it's a touchy one, I would say, for anyone in the industry, because you have to play by the rules, you have to play safe. And if you're smart about it, then I would say that you're standing out responsibly. It's like it really means that you're accepting the constraints rather than fighting them. And I think regulation can force clarity in a sense too. We focus on our product quality, right? And like our transparency behind that. We try to be accessible by also providing a really premium brand experience. And rather than exaggerated claims or edgy messaging, if you want to build something genuinely better and communicate it honestly, you don't need to cross lines to get attention. I think in regulated categories, restraint can actually be a competitive advantage if used correctly.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, that was another thing that I had noticed from some of the marketing is, you guys weren't quite marketing as like the organic version, but you're definitely talking about using things that kind of, created the right pH balance and the right environment inside the mouth. I mean, a big thing that's been obviously hard to combat, for the chewing tobacco, wing of nicotine products is that they obviously cause mouth cancer and can be bad for your mouth. But nicotine pouches are an alternative to that product. But you guys are talking about manufacturing the product with better ingredients to have a better situation, going on with the chemistry of the mouth. Like, how much are you allowed to talk about that? And is that a product feature that you guys are able to tout or talk about?
Yeah, I think, it's quite interesting when you look at the history of the Sesh formula as well. Sesh was formulated by Thomas Erickson. He's a really well-known individual within our category. He was behind Nicorette gum. He was behind the Zyn formula as well. And after Zyn, he built what he considers his upgraded formula. And that was what Sesh became. We bought that formula off him. He's part of our board now, and he works with us daily on constantly improving our formula and our products. And I think like that's what really attracted me to the company, was this sort of ability to take a brand that wasn't trying to be a loophole brand or a shock value nicotine company. Like, Sesh really felt intentional in the way it was positioned and the way it was designed at a formula level. I think like when I thought about coming on and taking on the challenge of building a brand around this formula that I just described, like I really saw a white space between legacy big tobacco that feel kind of dated, and then like also challenger brands that just are trying too hard to provoke. And I think like what Sesh does is it has a chance to be this like modern and adult nicotine brand. So the formula, it is built on taste. It's built on technology. We have a patented gum-based formula. It is a modern ritual, pouches in general, and the formula was designed to last longer, feel more balanced, and not just balanced from a taste profile, nicotine and flavor, but also from a longevity perspective, last longer, feel smoother in the mouth. We use MCT oil to improve mouthfeel. There's a lot of product benefits that goes into a formula like this that isn't standard. You look at your Zyns on the shelf; those are dry pouches. Sesh is considered a wet pouch, and it's designed to do so to improve mouthfeel. And I think all of those things are really what attracted me to Sesh and makes the pouch stand out on the shelves here in the US.
Awesome. So let's talk about what is allowed and what isn't. What's also interesting, in addition to regulation, there's also self-regulation, right? So, there are certain channels, whether it be in social, from a paid perspective, whether it's in Meta, whether it's in Google. It's not always that these channels are not allowed by regulation, but they are kind of self-regulated by the platforms themselves. I remember starting to see like nicotine toothpicks pop up on Facebook, and there was kind of this little bit of a whack-a-mole between, what was allowed and what isn't. So can you talk about how channels have kind of maybe come around, or, what channels can you use and what can't you today?
Yeah, great question. So every channel has their own internal code that they sort of follow, and every channel is different. On Meta, it's nicotine advertising is fairly restricted, and so we're really hamstrung there. But on Twitter or X, for example, they recently allowed the advertising of what they call smokeless alternatives, which is pouches, right? So we can freely advertise on X, whereas Meta we can't. Google we can. And so, it's just different. TikTok we avoid in general just because it's such a young audience across the board that we choose to stay away from that platform, same as Snapchat. So whether we can or can't is irrelevant to us. We take the responsible step of keeping those platforms out of our playbook. And, you listen to that, and if I was on a panel with other marketers, it'd be almost heart-wrenching for them to hear that, because so much revenue is coming in from TikTok Shop these days, or from other platforms, that if I was a sneaker brand or a t-shirt brand, I could just pump my product there quite easily. And that's what sort of brings me back to what I said earlier. It really makes marketing stigmatized products or products in highly regulated industries really makes you think harder, do better, and come up with more unique solutions to get your product out there, because it's less you can do. And when you find those solutions, they tend to go further and bring you more. So it's more rewarding. But we just have to play by the rules per platform and play where we can.
Awesome. So I know Own Social has been a channel that, has obviously been something that's fair game for most regulated substances, whether it's been in the cannabis space or cigars. How are you guys thinking about working with influencers or podcasters or creators or UGC? How do you leverage that channel to get the product in front of audiences that might already be out there that have been built third party by other creators or media companies? And then how do you leverage that type of creativity to build your own social media channels?
Yeah, look, we love to use content in general and creators through their own content as our communication engine, right? And I think when we use creators, we have our own rules as well, right? Like 85% of their audience must be above the age of 21. We only work with select creators that we, vet very strongly beforehand. And, we make sure that when we give them our product and we work with them, nothing's scripted. It's their own experience, their own nicotine experience, which is deeply personal to everyone. And, we don't tell them what to say. We're not trying to just sell product features here. We want to sell what we consider the most premium nicotine experience on the shelves here in America. And that, to me, is really important. So, we'll work with influencers, but they have to be handpicked. They have to be the right ones. We don't just send our product to anyone. They have to be authentic users of the product and be able to talk to it maturely. So that's also really important. And then another thing is like sampling. We know that our product converts, and when it's another tactic we use is trial. We know that when people try Sesh, they prefer it to existing solutions that are on the shelves today, because it is a more premium pouch, premium quality, premium ingredients. And so for context, there has to be a monetary exchange when you're sampling nicotine. So, we'll do events where people can come by and spend $1 to get a can. And it works really well in the sort of repeat purchase that we see from that. And the conversion from trial is high once people try it. We're a new brand, so we have to bring it to light that way. But I would say those are like the two main other tactics we use to really get the brand out there. We'll communicate via content and creators, and then we'll convert via trial and adoption.
Got it. And then what are the types of like sampling is a broad opportunity, right? It's basically anywhere where you can get in front of consumers and have that value exchange and get them to try it. So are there certain verticals that you guys are trying to show up in the real world? Is it tied to sports? Is it tied to lifestyle? Is it tied to music? Like, what are the environments in which you're trying to drive that sampling opportunity?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, there are like that just tend to resonate with our products really well. And over the last, I would say, year, we were really trying to let our product organically seep into those communities and respond to them ourselves. We didn't want to force it into, we didn't want to sit there at the start of last year and say, all right, we're going into basketball, for example. But we wanted to let the product find its home in a sort of corny way. But we ended up developing 3 community pillars that we thought were really helpful and where our product was performing best and being responded to well, which was sort of like the modern outdoorsman. So any of like those hunters, skiers, fishermen, hikers, guides, the campers, people who are spending a lot of time outdoors, long days outside that demand focus and patience, and like the guys that just want this clean, uninterrupted ritual. And I think that's kind of one category of people we found. And then the other was like the everyday athletes, right? So like whether it's you and me jumping on a tennis court or the golf green or pick up basketball, whatever it might be, but who are taking those moments seriously with their sport. They're not there to just clown around. They're people who love and appreciate and have a passion for the sport they enjoy. Sport naturally rewards control, rhythm, discipline, presence. So I think that's something that nicotine in the pouch format provides, and there's no distraction to it. So you're not going outside and using your hands to have a smoke break or vape or whatever it is. So those things are what we thought aligned well with the sort of everyday athlete. And then the third pillar or community that we really found our product resonating in was this sort of blue collar or first responder community. The military firefighters, EMTs, ski patrols or construction workers, the trade workers, truckers, anyone in logistics. We found that that's where, people had long shifts with like unpredictable levels of intensity. And there was this need for, discrete, reliable rituals as well. A great example was actually in the Malibu fires at the start of the year. There were a lot of requests from firefighters to get pouches for their long shifts fighting the flames. And, we went down and gave them Sesh by the bucket loads just to do our part and really give back. And I'd never seen people more thankful to receive these pouches than those guys. And, they were the ones who were being the real heroes. So it was nice to see that the community resonated with our products there as well. So that's kind of like the three we mainly focus on.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I see you've got some pickleball rackets up on the shelf too. Like I've definitely seen.
Oh yeah, those are paddle rackets. You can't.
Oh, those are padel. Okay, those are padel rackets. Okay,
Yeah,
let's go. Yeah, I haven't made it onto a padel court yet. I know it's taking the US by storm. But yeah, so that's interesting. I never thought about it from like the sportsman perspective. So so that's pretty interesting. What about offline channels? I know there's, some regulation around that as well, but can you do like out of home and billboards, or is that still restricted?
Yeah, you can do that. It's just like anything. There are a set of rules or, guided principles that we made ourselves that we follow. So I'm not going to put a billboard up opposite a high school. I'm going to put them in places where I can get, I would implore any marketer to do this, but where, majority of my audience is going to see them. Right. And so, you can do all these things. You just have to be really careful and smart about how you do it. That's the kind of the short answer.
Yeah. And any intention of going into some of these other high endurance sports like F1 or NASCAR, places where, it's kind of a bigger, getting the opportunity to put something on a race car or something like that and integrate into TV. It seems like that would be an interesting moment and probably where there's a fan base that would be resonate with it as well.
I think a great question, and kind of you nailed a sport and a industry that is very popular amongst tobacco before us and nicotine with us, right? Like there are the amount of emails I get from NASCAR teams, drivers, managers that ask us to wrap a car. We've done a few, to be honest. We've tried it, but so is every single nicotine pouch and every single big tobacco company. So my approach is, where it's loud within our category and where big tobacco already is, I'm not going to repeat their tactics. I can't outspend big tobacco. I can't beat them on, like I said, ad spend or presence. That's where their dollars will extend past mine. So I have to be smarter and have to find other solutions to be loud and have to play into Sesh's strengths, whether it's our product and our quality or, like you mentioned earlier, our celebrity cap table and the people that can help us and we can gain leverage from. I think when you talk about, building a brand as well and versus just performance driven, I think, they're not always opposite. Like a strong brand can make performance cheaper over time. And I think performance is how you can always pressure test your brand in the real world. And places like NASCAR and F1 are great places to test that. But when you're a new brand and your awareness is relatively low, those dollars can go to waste pretty quickly. So you have to, make your product experience the brand itself, right? And so we know that our product delivers and our brand will amplify it. And so, if it doesn't, no amount of performance spend could save me, even in an IRL or event at a NASCAR or F1 race, right? So to me, I pour my my effort into the brand itself, and I could have chased short-term performance early when I started here, but like I said, in regulated categories, there's this temptation to optimize everything for immediate conversion. And I took a bet on building a really premium brand that people are proud of. They're willing to whip out at a dinner table, put it on the table, leave it there, not necessarily be this like hidden product that they don't want anyone knowing about. I wanted to build a brand that people loved, and we took a bet on building, this distinct and elevated brand early. So whether it's our design, our brand voice, our messaging, our partnerships, even sometimes when attribution is a bit fuzzy, it was the long-term equity now that makes things that we're doing today a bit easier because of things we did yesterday or a year ago. And so that's kind of how I look at those partnerships. It's just, if Big Tobacco is doing it, I have to lean into my brand and the quality of my product and the partnerships that I can obtain, rather than like just going where you'd think it's obvious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Let's visit the celebrity cap table if you're able to comment on that, because that's obviously a really interesting move. So, you could have gone and decided to, do endorsements with some of these celebrities, and I'm sure their managers would have been glad to take the money for a one-off social post or even a long-term partnership. But you got these guys to put money into the company and really be true ambassadors because they have skin in the game and they have some upside on, whatever ends up happening. How did you guys approach identifying those celebrities that would make sense for that type of partnership? How did you convince them to see the long-term opportunity versus kind of the upfront, maybe cash value that would have come from a traditional endorsement? And then how do you activate those partners, as investors, but also folks that have big megaphones and big platforms themselves?
Yeah, I think we looked at individuals and personalities that had their own journey with, tobacco, nicotine, in their own way, right? Like guys like Post Malone, who will, gladly smoke a bunch of cigarettes on stage while he's performing. Guys like Diplo, who are openly big pouch users while they're DJing. The guys behind Rufus Du Sol, who, were vaping and wanted to find alternate solutions. Then there was comedians like Andrew Schultz, who, loves even the political side of things and the comedy he has around that, and nicotine and its journey in politics. Like that's something that, Andrew's been hilarious with, and a lot of his skits. There were a bunch of other musicians and actors. I could name them, but really the parallels were: did these individuals authentically believe in Sesh as a product, and would they use it? And if the answer was yes to both of those, then we explored it, right? And we could have taken dumb money from anywhere, but we wanted to also leverage the influence that some of these individuals had. That, piggybacking off my last answer, we knew we weren't going to have the spend that Big Tobacco would have. So going into a brand strategy, we had to leverage partnerships, and we had to, help us almost borrow credibility and relevance from people deep within culture. That gives us context, and that, it gives our community durability too. So I think looking at these guys and how they could help us early on, and how we could sort of claim ground on brands in Big Tobacco or from Big Tobacco was part of the decision making. Their willingness to help too. In our early conversations, we'd ask, are you planning to just, put some capital in and be a silent investor? If that's the case, we don't necessarily need it. But are you willing to be active, help us, push our message, support where you can and within reason? Then great, let's continue talking. And I think that's really what got this going for us. And then in terms of the second part of your question, which I believe was how do we activate them? A lot of it's meeting them where they are, right? Like these are really important people who, Sesh is a tiny piece of their life, whereas it's, a major part of mine. And so, I can't go and ask them every day, can you post this? Can you do that? Can you, pull this out on the red carpet or on stage? Or it's not realistic. But what I found was, if I could meet them with value and meet them where they were, value meaning, either really exciting business wins or updates that I could share them to help them get excited about their investment and about the product and the growth of the company. I thought that's always a great way to get an individual, anyone, be it celebrity or not, excited about helping. And then also meeting them where they are. You know, an example is Diplo, right? He's a legacy world famous DJ, but he also has this really fast growing run club that he's built across the United States, and he brings thousands of people together to run in these morning run clubs, and then he performs a set afterwards. And so instead of just asking Diplo to do stuff at his DJ sets at night, at the parties, at the major sets that he performs at all the time, why don't we meet him at like one of his other passions, which is the run club, and sort of bring nicotine to that morning ritual of, you know, caffeine, nicotine, exercise. And I think like there's a really interesting overlap between all of those things, where nicotine sits sort of like right in the middle. But yeah, that's something that he was personally really excited about, was willing to, you know, step aside after the race, give us interview time, talk with us, help push the product, promote it, post it. And I think if you can meet these individuals where their interests already lie, you go a lot further to sort of projecting your brand out there in a really authentic way as well. And I keep bringing that up, and I sound like a broken record, but it's in this category against competitors that are owned by big tobacco. It really is important to be authentic and have these members of the cap table who are so well known just be authentically who they are and authentically endorse it.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's a master's class in how you activate celebrities, both from the investment cap table perspective, but also the activation piece. Like, you can, you know, support the things that they're passionate about that don't maybe get the same amount of attention as the day job, so to speak. That seems like a great opportunity to add value at both sides of the equation. So
yeah, hopefully.
Love it. Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks so much for the product. I was excited to get my shipment, and glad to be a converted user from the old you know, big tobacco alternative that we're all familiar with. So I'm loving it so far. I appreciate it.
If you ever need more, you know where to find us. We'll happily look after you. We appreciate you, and thank you for the time.
Yeah, of course, man. Where would you like to point the audience if they want to learn more about Sesh or connect with you directly, if maybe they got a partnership opportunity or something like that?
Yeah, for sure. Go, you know, at Sesh on Instagram is a great place to start. We've got a lot of educational content there and things you can learn about the brand and the formula that you might not know. SeshProducts.com is the website if you want to try it out. And then, yeah, if you need any help or want any further information, or you want to talk to someone at the company, email is info@seshproducts.com.
Love it. And for everybody who's following along at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the show or watching the podcast, go ahead and give us a follow. If you're listening, an organic review on whatever podcast platform you happen to be listening on, it's how we find a larger audience organically. And if there is a fellow marketer in a controlled, or what did you call it? A
highly regulated industry,
or, you know, just somebody who you think would benefit from hearing a little bit about Josh's journey or the conversation we had today, don't forget to share the show. And with that, Josh, I will wish you a great weekend, and maybe we can connect when I'm out there at South by.
Yeah, definitely. That'd be great, Dylan. I appreciate it.